morning, campers. Welcome back to Kerbal Space Program. This is episode 8. You did miss a little bit of something, but that's kind of a bonus episode that will be coming out at another date. You didn't miss anything super important, just a little mission that there's a little bit of money involved, but nothing major. But you can see we're designing a experiment pod here, one that can return itself, if need be, to Kerbin. It's got a parachute, some power supplies, and RCS, as well as a little drone core to bring that back. And we're also going to be designing a nuclear tugboat here that is going to deliver this experiment out to the station in orbit over the moon. Now, the reason we're doing this with a nuclear tugboat is that we need to take that station at the moon and move that to Minmus to complete an older contract that we had to take in a previous episode in order to pay for one of our earlier missions. We want to kind of resolve all the hanging contracts we've got right now, which means we need to, in one episode, we need to perform this experiment over Minmus, land on the moon, plant a flag on the moon, and get science from the moon, and do all of that on Minmus as well. So we're going to be landing on Minmus, we're going to be landing on the moon, and we are going to be moving the entire space station over to Minmus. So this is going to take at least 2 launches. You'll see we're working on the design for this nuclear tug here. I've done something similar with this before. Usually it's unmanned, but I decided to throw some Kerbals onto this one. Got a docking port on the front, docking port on the back. You want it, the one on the back is the important one because you can hook up ships to that and effectively pull them to their destination. It's much more stable than trying to push them there, and less likely to have the entire ship fold in half on your clampetrons when you do that. While the docking node on the front makes it easy to dock with space stations, or I've used something similar to this to take a moon rocket out to Duna, and then you can stick the lander on the nose. You can also see here we've brought in a new mod. We were supposed to bring in Kerbinside with this episode, but I had some issues with performance relating to that mod, so we're not going to be seeing that one in this save file, I'm afraid. I had so much fun with it, though. Be sure to go check out the live streams I did from that mod. Really spectacular work they've done. But so we have added procedural fairings, which are covering up the docking node on the back of the tugboat there. It's much more secure connection than just the docking port. Like I mentioned earlier, it can when you're pushing against the docking port, the entire rocket can kind of fold in half at that point. So you want something more secure, and the fairings provide that. So the launch stage, you can see here, we're redesigning from scratch. It's going to be kind of inspired by the Delta IV Heavy that's going to be launching the Orion next month. Actually, just a couple weeks here, I think. And there was a brief test flight in sandbox mode, and it didn't go particularly well. So you'll see a minor change happen here to the launch stage before we actually take off with it. That's probably going to get, yep, there it is. There's some extra fuel on there. Probably see that get uploaded. No commentary, no editing, just a kind of bonus video at some point soon. Anyway, we're going to take this out to the launch pad. And ignition, going to do a quick roll. We've got 3 mainsails powering this, and it's instead of using one big rocket in the middle and a couple of smaller boosters, we're just doing 3 of the big rocket, just all in. Saves a bit of money because you're only buying 3 of the super expensive engines. That's something we have to worry about now. But do the roll program, get us moving sideways a little so we're not over the launch pad, just in case we have another accident. Fast forward a little bit to about just over 10,000 meters when the boosters run out finally. Cut the engine, drop those. Learned my lesson not fire the engine through booster separation. That ended poorly for us at least once. Gunning it into the upper atmosphere. We're going to run out of fuel in the main booster now. And we do have a small second stage attached to this. That's just up underneath the nuclear tugboat. And of course the nuclear tugboat has its own engines that can get it the rest of the way into orbit. Separating the fairings there. In the test flight, I accidentally separated half of the rocket at this point as well. There was a launch escape system to get the capsule out, and I accidentally fired that off. But in the actual flight, we are fine getting into orbit here on the nuclear engines. Plenty of fuel left, so now we just need to... I do remember that there was a lander we left in orbit over the moon, so we're just going to go ahead and use the same launch stage, and we're going to send up this kind of a tweaked version of the orbiter we used previously. And it's going where the nuclear. I actually did some weight calculations on this one, and realized I could send up an extra 20 tons of fuel on this rocket as well, and still get into low Kerbin orbit. So we're going to do that. So this rocket will be effectively a fuel tug for that lander that we left out at the moon. And that'll let us get the moon out of the way. And then, of course, we've got some new experiments to add on to it. Launch escape system. It's got landing legs. We're going to try and land on Minmus with this as well. Hopefully, it will still have most of the orbiter's fuel by the time it gets to Minmus. We'll see. If it manages to arrive at Minmus with most of the fuel intact in the final stage, then it'll be more than capable of landing and getting back home. Of course, we've got the nuclear tug. That'll probably be able to help out as well. In fact, we're going to link these two up to get them out to the moon in the first place. So jumping out to the launch pad now. Very similar flight profile to the one we just saw, so we're actually just going to show the launch here, go into the roll, and jump straight into orbit. So I do like the rather graceful roll this rocket does. It's quite nice. So just rolling to put the booster sideways, because these are just strong enough that we start doing the gravity turn before we separate the boosters. So you want to have those out to the left and right of your rocket when those separate, rather than the top and bottom. Anyway, showing us arriving on orbit and pulling up to the tugboat here. Very graceful docking procedure here. You missed probably about 5 orbits it took us to catch up with this thing, because we just went straight into the second launch. We didn't bother waiting for that to go all the way around one time. A stock part revamp mod providing useful lights on our docking nodes here. So we are going to keep using this nuclear tug for a bit. I'm probably going to redesign it once we've unlocked some more bits on the tech tree. I would very much like to get a version of this up there with the Clampetron Senior rather than the Junior, because the Junior is really not that good of a, or not the Junior, the standard Clampetron is really not that secure of a docking. It's not that secure of a connection, so we actually have some issues with that. I mean, you can see it right here. The entire rocket was flexing there for a moment against the, right where the 2 docking ports met. So, better with the Clampetron Senior, that's for sure. We're going to eventually do that. But you can see we've boosted ourselves out to the moon, just trimming up the orbit here. We want to intercept that space station because the lander is connected to that. We also need to move the entire station around. So, one thing I didn't really do, I did not count my docking ports before I launched. So we happen to have exactly enough docking ports for everything, but we're not going to really be able to connect all these in just such a way that we can easily move them all out to Minmus together. So starting to realize that here, but you're going to see the intricate ballet we have to do in order to get everything connected up here. You can see lots and lots of snack containers on the tugboat. One thing I remembered is that in the bonus episode that will eventually be going up, we fast-forwarded time significantly and left these Kerbals up here, and they've gone through a good chunk of their snack supply, so we're bringing them a bunch of extras on this trip as well. Disconnecting the orbiter and its booster stage, which still has most of its fuel in it, but we also made sure to put some extra RCS on there, because we knew this was going to get into orbit with a whole bunch of fuel on it. So this is going to let us dock pretty easily with the station. I'm going to go ahead and fast forward through most of this because the docking took quite some time. But as you can see, we're going to be moving through it pretty quickly here in 4 times time acceleration. Took a quick screenshot there. Quick jump is hardly even noticed that since the music was fast-forwarded, but I tweeted out a picture of that because I was awfully proud of getting all this stuff up together. And switching over to the station, we're going to reorganize how this is all connected because I want to use that bottom docking port for the nuclear tugboat. Park the orbiter pretty close. Rearrange the station. Now the controls were behaving a little strangely here for me, but we managed to get docked back onto the yeah, it's kind of going the opposite of what I expect there. We managed to get docked back onto the lander here without much trouble. Just had to adapt my frame of reference a little bit because it wasn't quite showing me what I thought it was on the nav ball. have a little difficulty getting it docked back up again, and it's not the first time and not the last time we're going to have issues with that, but eventually it does connect. There we go. So now we're just going to turn the entire station so that the other side docking port is facing our orbiter and the booster stage. And we're just going to bring that straight in and dock with the opposite the lander here. And that'll leave the bottom docking node open for the big nuclear tugboat. Lining up very carefully. I don't want to come in too quick with this thing because it has a whole bunch of mass, and that can really wreck it can really wreck the station if I mess this up. And I've forgotten to retract the solar panels, so going to be nice and careful as we come in here. Those lights on the docking ports helping a great deal. You can tell when you're on target because the circle is centered on the other docking port. It's very useful. Again, that's the stock part revamp mod is what brought that in. Again, links to all the mods we're using are in the description below, including the new Procedural Fairings mod is now going to be in that list. Though, no Kerbinside, I'm sad. I had so much fun with that. But we're bringing in the tugboat to dock onto the station here as well. My original impulse is just to dock with the bottom node of the tugboat facing the bottom node of the station. That way I can just go straight into pulling it out to the to Minmus once I undock the lander and the orbiter. Unfortunately, so we've retracted the solar panels and checking to make sure I'm not going to be covering those up once we're docked. But in order to not hit the solar panels, that means my engines are pointed at the lander and the orbiter respectively. And it turns out I don't have enough clearance, so we had to stop there because I almost hit the other two rockets. Move away, and we're going to just have to reorganize here real quick. Separate the experiment pod, make sure everything's active before we do that. Last thing we want to have to do is chase that off into space. Very nimble it is with such low mass and 4 RCS blocks on it. Almost lost control of it there. It's just flying all over the place. We managed to get it stopped again and flip the tugboat around. Just going to dock that to the station as a pusher instead of a puller. It should still work, but we're going to have to be careful as we boost out to Minmus because of the connection being, again, fairly weak since it's a clampetron. Standard clampetron rather than the senior. Bringing the experiment pod back in. Again, it's all over the place. We switched to fine controls here in order to keep control of it. Which resulted in at least one caps lock tweet without me noticing. But we move the crews around, pump some fuel into the lander, and we're going to disconnect the lander and the orbiter with the booster stage. The orbiter and booster are going to pull the lander down into a lower orbit so it can go ahead and go for the moon landing. Our objectives on the surface of the moon are we need to plant a flag, and we need to get some science back from the surface. Unfortunately, I don't have a proper science lab up here. We've only got the station science lab, which is good for Eurekas, but we don't have an actual a science module, the really big stock one. So we weren't able to, I'm saying a lot tonight, we weren't able to scrub out our experiment pods on the lander, so we're going to be missing a couple things, so we're not going to aim for any of the really big important craters. We're just going to hit the highlands, I believe is where we wound up landing, but just going for an area between craters. You can see us getting into our lower orbit here. Used about half of the fuel that was left in the booster. Again, a bunch of that is in the lander itself now. We moved that over while we were still connected to the station. That way the lander could maneuver itself away. Getting a nice circular orbit. You want to be nice and low before you go into your descent profile. That way you don't use up any fuel in the lander that you might need to stop yourself before you hit the ground. Lets you get a much more efficient burn as well. You come in a little bit slower. It doesn't take as much fuel to stop you. See, just checking all our snack and fuel levels. Making sure I've got plenty of RCS fuel in the booster and the command pod. Orbiter and booster is what I'm calling it. Orbiter and booster. Oy. It's been a long day. The total time that passed from the start of this episode to this moment in the episode of actual playtime was about 2 hours. And we're not even halfway done. So it's been a very long day. This mission wound up far more complicated than I expected it to be. But that's what half the fun is. So you're going to see some more of that here. Anyway, we've transferred a Kerbal into the lander, and we are going to go ahead and move into our landing profile here. Lighting the engine and braking orbit here. We're just going to go ahead and cut straight to the landing procedure once we actually depart from the orbiter and booster. Legs deployed. I made sure to keep this. I had originally cut just to this part here, but I kept in the legs deploying because, one, it looks cool, and two, it kind of gives you an idea where we're landing. We're actually quite close to the previous crater that this landed in. In fact, we are so close that the slope here is extremely steep, so we're just coming down very, very gingerly here. Well, I guess it's more of an orange than red. Sorry, anyway, coming down very carefully here, ignoring the stupid ginger joke. There's... Oh, almost touched down, almost touched down. There's 1 pad, 2, and there's 4. Oh, nope, 2 again. Okay, we're just gonna jump over here and hit one of the less steep spots. All right, and landing again. Still a little bit bouncy, but we made it down intact. And it is science time. So fast forwarding here as we go through all the stuff that I do and do not have. Luckily, the magnetometer is able to take as many readings as you can do with it. So we just go ahead and bring the Kerbal out. I believe this is Sean or Alan. That's Alan. Okay. So he's going to plant the flag, get us that contract done. You can see the little green flashes up in the upper right corner. And reusable lander site 2. Can our next reusable lander have reusable experiments too? So, yeah, future reusable lander project is going to... We're going to have to launch another one before too long because we've unlocked significantly more science experiments since this one went up. And, we'll hopefully put a proper science lab in moon orbit before then as well so we can reset the experiments before we land again. Anyway, going to meet back up with our orbiter and booster stage here. Switching back to the orbiter to actually pick the thing up because, of course, I forgot to put RCS on the lander itself. Which, I mean, I might say that's design intent there, because makes the lander a little bit lighter. Though really, I just completely forgot. So, well, the lander is carrying some extra weight anyway, because it still has that broken decoupler and unusable engine mounted inside it from where it was supposed to be a 2-stage lander. We're boosting ourselves back up to the station, and I noticed that we're pretty much out of RCS fuel, so we actually top off the lander again from the fuel in the booster stage, and we're just going to leave the lander behind. We got the Kerbal off, we got the science off, we're going to leave the lander here just in case we need it again. It has full fuel this time, so we boost back up to the station, wind up using all the fuel in the booster and ditching that on the way. Also managed to use all the RCS fuel as well, so nice efficient thing too. We used that last bit of RCS to bring the booster onto a collision course with the moon, so that's not going to stay in orbit, that's gone. That's going to crunch into the other side of the moon, not too far from where we landed actually. Though we weren't watching it when it hit, so I didn't get to see if anything lived. Docking back up with the station now. Of course the light's helping out again. Giving in one more visual cue of whether or not you're lined up. It's very, very nifty. And this docking goes much better than some of the other ones we've done tonight. Still bounced a couple of times, but it connected very, very quickly. So I'm trying to figure out here how exactly I'm going to send everyone out to Minmus, and I realized I'm going to have to disconnect the orbiter and send that separately. So, yeah, and we're doing something more complicated than I've done before here. We've actually got to set maneuver nodes and transfer from the moon to Minmus, which I've never done that before. I mean, I've done transfers from Kerbin to Duna, which winds up being about the same. But we do some fiddling with maneuver nodes. I try and use the built-in warning from Kerbal alarm clock for when the node is actually going to be, but I didn't want to wait that long, so I tried to do it myself. Wound up with a maneuver exactly at where the Kerbal alarm clock said the window was going to be. So listen to alarm clock, it knows what it's doing. Get the maneuver set up, and we already transferred out the orbiter, and you see here we're transferring out the station and the tugboat. I did the entire orbiter's burn while I was in the map screen, though, so that wasn't very interesting to look at. So we're just going to go ahead and jump straight out to arriving at Minmus. Even though the orbiter left first, the science lab and the nuclear tugboat arrived at Minmus before the orbiter did. You'll see the orbiter coming in and doing its insertion burn. Plenty of fuel still left in both. I was very impressed with how little fuel it took to get from the moon to Minmus. It just took a significant investment in time. In fact, this entire sequence of events takes several weeks in game time, which comes back to bite me in a few minutes. Well, a few weeks in the game, but you know what I mean. Anyway, we're showing our station is establishing a nice high orbit, so it can get started on that science experiment. We've had this one in the works for a while. Tried to launch it a few times already. That was our big tragedy. Lost 4 Kerbals attempting to launch this station the first time. But we have finally made it out to Minmus with our plant experiment. Moving all of our Kerbals into the science lab. Full staff of 4 Kerbals. And running the experiment. So we're going to leave them be while they are up here doing this. The orbiter, which is in a lower orbit, is going to drop onto the surface of Minmus and get us a couple of other contracts. Nice safe touchdown. We hit one of the big ice lakes. In fact, we hit an ice lake that we've been to before, unfortunately. I thought it was a different lake, but you'll see when we do the experiments that we aren't getting enough science for it. So I went into the map view eventually and noticed that it connects to... Yep, there it is. It connects to a previous landing site, so... Greater Flats again. Attempt to do the solar particle experiment, but that doesn't even work on the surface of Minmus, which I thought it would since it had no atmosphere. I was wrong. Do all the other experiments, anyway. Mystery Goo, Science Junior, Magnetometer. I think we did a temperature reading there as well, and just because I hit the press map barometer, I know it doesn't do anything in vacuum, but I always hit it anyway, just in case. Because I know some people have decided to put a mist or something on Minmus, so I never know which update might include some sort of pressure biome thing. Because I know actual moons, even one like our moon that has no perceivable atmosphere, has some particulates. In fact, there's a space center fairly close to me, Wallops Island, which got the news lately for the Antares accident. But they launched a mission out to our moon not too terribly long ago called Laddie. And that was a lunar atmosphere and dust experiment explorer, I think. LADE. I don't know what it stands for exactly, but it was it did a couple orbits of the moon and was collecting dust from the very, very thin but very much present lunar atmosphere. So I'm always hoping they might add something like that into Kerbal. So I do try and use our barometer when I can. Anyway, we are going to a second landing site, so I can try and actually get some more science from this mission since we hit a place we'd already been. And touching down nice and gingerly. Don't fall over, don't fall over, don't fall over. And we're fine. Fast forwarding again as we do all of our experiments once more. Trying the solar particle ones, but again, doesn't work. We are able to do our mystery goo and our science bay experiments here as well. Though you might recall that we have in fact been to this biome as well. This is considered Minmus's slopes. So I go EVA and try and do a EVA report, nothing. Surface sample, nothing. So, yeah, we've been here too. Oh, well, at least we brought experiments this time. Yeah, we landed in a, actually I think it was when we landed in the other time in the Greater Flats, we flew a Kerbal over to the slopes and did some experiments there. And trying to get the data out of the thermometer so I can do another thermometer experiment, and having some issues getting close enough to it without falling over, but we managed to grab it. Luckily did not break the game this time when he fell over. You might recall that was almost an identical situation to what happened with Lodaus Lodaus. But he fell over on Minmus and destroyed the universe. So luckily that did not happen there this time, so we're going to go ahead and head back into orbit, dock with our space station, and see what's going on up here, see how far along they are in the experiment. Good straight-in approach here to the station, does not take much effort at all to dock. I just love having lights on the docking ports. That's worth every hassle of installing the stock part revamp mod, even if you have to go in like I did and specifically remove certain parts from everything so that it doesn't mess up your other mods. But it is worth every second that takes to get the lights on your docking ports. Checking our snack situation, because again we have been in orbit for a considerable amount of time already, and we're not even a third of the way done on our plant experiment yet, so fast forwarding a bunch here. You can see our snacks dropping almost as fast as our Eurekas were going up. But we do have plenty of snacks on the station for 3 Kerbals, but we are going to need to take 3 of them back with us in order to not run out of supplies up here before our next mission. So we are not going to be taking the tugboat back. I don't think that has quite enough fuel to make it all the way back, but the orbiter has more than enough to get back with the plant experiment. So we're going to separate the orbiter. We got all of our science done, moved everything into the orbiter here. We're going to pick up the plant experiment in just a moment, and then that is going to be pretty much the end of the episode. We're going to boost everything back to Kerbin and see what we get. Undocking from the science station there. So depending on what contracts we get, we might move the station back to Kerbin, maybe back to the moon. We'll see in a future episode. We're probably going to have to bring some fuel out here, though, which we ought to be able to do with my my version of the Delta IV Heavy. I mean, we got a ton of fuel out to the moon, so something similar to that might be able to get up here and top off the tanks in this. Anyway, moving the science experiment over. It's got plenty of RCS fuel, so we're going to be able to use that to deorbit. We want to make sure we do this over land. So we're going to try and be very, very careful with our Kerbin approach. We don't want to risk coming down over water this time, because this plant experiment is worth a lot of money. And frankly, I want to get as much back from these rockets as possible, because each one of these 2 rockets cost me about 150,000 funds to launch. So we're down about 300,000 funds on this episode already, and we've only picked up about, I think about 200,000 from our from completing contracts. So we need to get this one down intact and recover some funds from our actual ships themselves from recovering those. So ideally we'll be landing on dry ground. And dot. Or not. This went on for several minutes, so as you can see I'm fast forwarding it here. They would not join together. I was rotating and I was turning the SAS on and off, and finally they connect. I had to kind of boost into it with the RCS, but that was an interesting little dance that did there. But we are secure. Had to adjust my trajectory in order to get a return to Kerbin. That was within the atmosphere. Performing the maneuver here to exit Minmus. You'll see our trajectory start to move here any second now. There it goes. Doing the burn. Nice quick burn, takes almost no time at all. And so we're transferring back to Minmus, and suddenly, uh-oh, that was our Kerbal alarm clock, just brought us out of time warp. We're not even halfway back to Kerbin. And, oh, the transfer window to Duna has opened. So that's bad. We're checking our snack supply here, but we are going to have to continue this in the next episode because we got to get a rocket off the pad and out to Duna before this one gets home. So they've got plenty of snacks. Hopefully they will be okay. We will recover this spaceship in a future episode. I will see you all next time.